fellow travelers, and welcome to the Version Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Ragnar Morales boards the mothership. He is the all-star artist of Order and Outrage from Dark Horse Comics. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Miss Morales. Thank you so much for coming to Traversing the Stars podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's totally a pleasure, sir. You're a fantastic artist, so it's an honor to speak with you, sir.
You're being way too kind unnecessarily, but I appreciate it.
Well, actually, got to meet you. I think it was Royal Comic Con, and I got a few of your autographs on. Let's see, it's right in front of me. We have let's see, Our Man. That's right. I had you autograph Our Man for me, and that was fantastic.
That is you. You dropped the dog. I kept it.
So I always start with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for comics, and who were your earliest influences?
Well. I told you that I was going to tell you a story about Super Puerto Rican.
Okay.
Ironically, La Boriqueña is going to be at the Pennsylvania School of Art and Design, I think it's called, in Lancaster. So go up and show up. I'm going to show up there tomorrow and come take a look at the walls. It's good stuff. Speaking of Super Puerto Ricans. So I was born in Manhattan, and in 1971, we moved to New Jersey, and across the street, there was a bunch of kids saying Puerto Rican this and Puerto Rican that. I was 5 years old. Mind you, 5. So don't hold me to this, okay? 5 freaking years old. So I grabbed a towel from the back of my father's Pontiac as we were unpacking. One of the bathroom towels, wrapped it around my neck and ran up to him and says, "I'm not Puerto Rican, I'm super Puerto Rican." That's what got me going. The fact that I was already an outcast. At 5 years old, I knew it. And at 5 also, ironically, I knew what I was going to be. I was going to be some form of an artist. So I guess it's just one half of just your power fantasy, kids and their power fantasies and discovering what's good and evil, what's right and wrong. And that's part of it. And I was drawn by the colors. I was drawn by the anatomy. For some reason, I was big on anatomy as a young artist. Probably because it in power fantasies, it's everything to the nth degree, So there's a lot of information there. And as I've just discovered that I've just been diagnosed autistic, so that means that I have a thing for absorbing information, and it becomes natural to me. So the more information that was out there, the more I just wanted to gobble up. And my earliest influences were probably something along the lines of some trade paperback, not trade, one of those Treasury editions, and they always did these old reprints. So I was into Joe Shuster, I was into C.C. Beck. And it always some sort of a compilation too. So along the lines, I discovered my very first big influence was Neil Adams, rest his soul. And he invigorated me because I was also a Boy Scout early on, and of course I wasn't when I was 5, but as I grew up, and I discovered him in the mid '70s, a couple of years later. I was getting Boys Life magazine, and Norman Rockwell was doing the covers, and he also did something called the telephone back in the day, and they used to hang on walls or on the end tables, and we would get something called the Yellow Pages, and back then Ma Bell, before they became AT&T, hired Norman Rockwell. Well, they got the license to a lot of his paintings of people talking, So Norman Rockwell mixed with Neil Adams and anybody, and that kind of basically pointed me the direction of the kind of artists that inspired me in the industry. It didn't take long for me to go from a Neil Adams to a Mike Grell or a Jim Aparo, in a similar vein of style. Then I went on to discover John Buscema and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez and all these guys who are really good at body language and expression and storytelling, and that's where I feel that I get my strength from, is that inclination toward that type of storytelling, of being able um, to be able to tell a story, emotionally in subtext.
Mm.
So subtlety is one of my strengths, I think.
I mean, I think that's fantastic about your arc is that it is so expressive. So when you're thinking about a scene, and let's say the writer gives you a script with panel description, how are you approaching the expressions of your characters? How are you finding the essence of what you think they're feeling in that moment?
It's in a dialogue. I draw to the dialogue, which is annoying because sometimes you do something artistically that the writer doesn't anticipate, and they change the dialogue
Mm.
for whatever reason. Now I'm expressing one emotional content that's been completely wiped out, and because they're seeing it from their point of view, their half of the story. So the scene where they want to interject something that could probably be used later in the story, and I'm just at the moment. So that's it's basically it's really just that simple. I like to, I read the script, and the description is more of an ambiance kind of a thing where you're really getting more of a feel of the atmosphere around, and then the dialogue tells you, how the actor is. So, the ambiance, and of course you can always do things with lighting, that can make something more impactful artistically. So that's a little bit of both, but I lean heavily on the dialogue.
So you actually went to the very prestigious Kubert School of Art. So what was that experience like, and how did the school hone your craft?
Oh, I was, it's funny. I wanted to be a baseball player as well, and I was actually a really good athlete. I could run fast, I could throw far. And when I quit baseball in my freshman year, and I started when I was 8 years old, so from 8 years old to freshman year in high school, I just looked out and I didn't want to do it anymore. And when I told my coach, he says, "Well, what am I going to tell the JV coach?" I said, "Well, tell him I quit." And he says, "What are you going to do?" And I says, "I'm going to be an artist." I'm going to go from one extreme to the other. I'm going to go from one job you can't have to another job you can't have. By the way, I'm going to start singing for a rock band. I might as well just say that. And so I was lucky because the Cuban school is only 15 minutes away from the house I was raised in, so I didn't have to worry about housing. I had a car, and I drove to school, every day. And it's a really good school, in that it's all you do is art. Now it's not accredited because it's only a 3-year school, but the industry is littered from editors to publishers to writers, people you don't see necessarily as a comic book artist, that have gone to that school. Maybe they go in there and they think that they can maybe develop something, and then they realize that the people around them are light years ahead of them, and that the competition is too stiff, so they switch gears and they go in a different direction. So you will find a QB everywhere. My colorist is a QB, former student of mine. I used to teach there as well. And so it's a really good school because it's boot camp. It's artistic boot camp. It's 38 college credits a year. That's an awful lot of college credits. And and Joe used to really tell us to not have part-time jobs. You can't work your way through school here because when you come home, you got 8 hours of homework. And when I taught, I would have certain students that were distracted, and it showed, and they weren't getting enough out of the course. You see, because this is more than just a career; it's a lifestyle. You have to live it, and you have to have enough passion for that. And if you don't have that, you can't go anywhere with it. But other than that, it was just, they teach you everything from now. Back when I didn't, when I went, they didn't have this, but now they have computer courses, Illustrator, Photoshop, that kind of a thing, and they've got color theory, and they've got painting, and they've got anatomy, live drawing anatomy. You have graphics and storytelling and basic drawing and everything. It's 10 courses a week, about 2.5 hours per course with lunch in between, and 8 hours of homework a night. It's quite a work because they hone you, because when you get out in the field, editors don't give a shit how good you are. They have deadlines to meet, and you have to be able to efficiently work and proficiently work. Um, and that's how you get in, and that's how you earn your chops, by being reliable. They say the greatest ability is availability, right?
Yeah.
Or reliability, or durability, or whatever you want to call it. But it's those abilities that are important, and that's what publishers are looking for. So, very good school, very well, though not accredited. It's renowned, and we're everywhere, and not just my colorist back when I was working with Valiant was Bill Dunn. He's a fine artist. He does some paintings now, gorgeous, gorgeous, surreal stuff. Oh, and by the way, he also works for Cartoon Network and he does the backgrounds for Batman. So I mean, it's everywhere. We're everywhere.
Well, I will say, as someone who does indie art, comic books myself, not as a writer, not an artist, a dependable artist is like gold. There's not a lot of them, but the ones that you can guarantee that they'll produce this much in a given month, they're like gold.
For someone like you, I suggest getting someone young and vigorous, rather than someone who's old and has their pace.
Right.
It's because, yeah, and especially since over time things change. I mean, I was just a penciler, and I'm a penciler inker, and that requires, like, it's essentially twice the workload. So you can't give me a deadline as if I'm just a penciler. You have to consider the fact that I'll be inking as well, so that extends things. And I wash. I do, washes. I do gray tones because I'll take advantage of the technology we have. Back in the old days, you can do that. It was very simple printing process. Now everything's computerized, so you can do halftones very easily, and actually helps with the colorists too, because the colorists kind of gives them a guideline. They follow the lead that you give them in the gray tones, because you've already spotlighted the light source and you're molding and you're shaping things for them, so they have to do less of it. So essentially, they're just dropping color, putting in a few highlights here and there, and adding their little sparkle and moving on to the next thing. So, 6 of one, half dozen. If you know the industry well enough, you kind of know where you're leading it off for other people, and how maybe what you're doing is helping them along. And colors, because they get shit on all the time. Color, they're the last ones. The writer takes all the time, the pencil takes all the time, the inker takes all the time, then the letterer and the colorist are scrambling. So it's not uncommon to hear colorists staying up for 24 hours to do 2 books.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I do think colorists and letterers are the least appreciated in the comic book world, because you always know the artist has a lot of fame, though a good writer, a lot of fame. You often don't know the name of the colorist, and you certainly don't know the name of the letterer. And in letters, I think, only get credit when they do something bad. Unfortunately, they don't get credit when they're doing something well.
Yeah, and nowadays so much of it is computerized, so it's kind of hard to discern who's a really good letterer. I mean, I worked with people like, my first one was Tim Harkins. And many, 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 many years later, I ran into him. He was teaching people how to play golf. He was out of the industry. He tried to get me into it. I was like, no, it's too expensive. And so Tim Harkins was my first, but Gaspar Saladino was, he worked with me on Black Condor, and I loved his lettering. I even loved the shape of his balloons. It's really cool. But, there's so many good ones, but now, because of computer lettering, hard to tell. Hard to tell how much of it, and even with the sound effects is where you would get your bones as a letterer. When I was working with Valiant, I was disenchanted with some of the placements of the lettering in terms of the sound effects. They weren't reading my leads, so I did for a couple of issues of the lettering of the sound effects. And that was fun. I enjoyed that. But now it's just hard to tell. But there's some good ones out there. I mean, I would love to work with Janice Chiang. I think she's wonderful. There's a lot of good people out there still.
I mean, you've had an amazing career in the comic book industry as an artist, and I mean, you're working on an upcoming book called Order and Outrage from Dark Horse Comics, which is written by the fantastic Jim Starlin, who everyone knows from Infinity Gauntlet. So how did you get involved in the project, and what intrigued you about the concept?
First of all, it's not from Dark Horse. It's from us with Dark Horse.
Gotcha.
Keep that in mind. It's not their property. It's ours.
Okay.
Primarily Jim's, but he's attaching me to it, and I'm doing the visuals for it. It was, Facebook is wonderful, because you get people's birthdays. and they just chime up, and you get the notification. You're like, oh, I know this guy. Let me wish him happy birthday. And Jim, I happen to have his phone number. We met in Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun.
Terrificon.
Yeah, Terrificon. Yes. And one of my friends and pseudo pseudo agents, because now I'm working with Renee Wittestetter, but Spencer Beck had a big dinner, and I sat next to Jim, and we just hit it off and had a wonderful time talking. And so on his birthday, I wished him a happy birthday. I sent him a text, and he says, thanks, what's your availability? He goes, are you exclusive? I said, no, I'm not exclusive. What do you have in mind? And he says, well, as you know, I can't draw anymore. I said, I heard, but I don't know anything beyond that. He says, well, soda machine, I sliced the meat between my thumb and forefinger.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I can't draw anymore. I can only draw for like 15 minutes before I have to stop. And he asked me if I wanted to do some work. And I think Dreadstar might have been the first thing he wanted to give me. But as these things take time, and by the time he addressed it again, he goes, oh, but hey, I can draw again. So I was like, all right, well, Jim, nice knowing you. He goes, actually, I have another idea in mind. It's something called Order and Outrage. And right off the bat, I loved it. I love the title because it's obviously political.
Yeah.
If anybody knows anything about me, I'm a progressive asshole. And I have been paying attention, literally. It's actually been a kind of like a pseudo hobby for me for 40 years, politics, because I was a teenager when Reagan got into office. And I remember how we left off with Jimmy Carter, and we had oil tankers on the outskirts, beyond the territory of America. And how come these oil tankers weren't coming in? We were having people having even odd numbers to get their gas. Back in the day, if you had an even odd, the last number on your license plate, even or odd, told you what day you can go to get the gas. So you had to gas up for more than one day if you really need to. So you had to be very very careful with that. And how we went from that and OPEC and the Ayatollah Khomeini and the hostages in Iran and blackouts and brownouts in New York City, Son of Sam, and Yankees winning 2 championships in a row. I mean, there was just so much hell for me. I'm a Mets fan. I'm sorry. And it was hell. And then all of a sudden Reagan came in. It was like a light switch went on and everything was perfect again. I said, no, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. I'm maybe 14, but I know even then that things don't, flip over that easily. And then it was around his inauguration that he announced the hostages coming home. I said, well, there's no way he could have done that. He's not even president yet, And then so I started, really paying attention more to the news back then. And back then we still had the fairness doctrine. So we were somewhat getting the truth. Nowadays, you don't get it at all. News is considered entertainment, and therefore it's all opinion. So when Fox News can lie all they want, that's how they got out of the Smartmatic problem that they when they were sued for defamation. Tucker Carlson, who will listen to me? I'm an entertainer. That's what he was saying, and that's how they got away with it, assholes. So yeah, I'm very political. I'm very into the classes. Class warfare. It's no surprise I'm a big fan of Rage Against the Machine. That kind of thing. So Order and Outrage right off the bat said it, and I knew I was going to be motivated to talk about class warfare, and sure enough, that's exactly what it's basically. It's about. It's just about this this planet. Of course it's science fiction because it's Jim Starlin. And there's the Order, which is this large, overbearing dictator. He's a fascist. Constantly signs everywhere, life is better with order, that kind of a thing. It's essentially Trump. Yeah. And okay, well maybe Bolsonaro, but anyway, he's a real fascist, and Erdogan, Turkey. Anyway, so he he's this overbearing figure, and she has come from the lower classes, and has risen up through circumstances to be the thorn in his side. So I don't want to get too much into it. I asked Jim for a synopsis for these kinds of things, and he didn't give it to me yet. So,
well, I think what I like a lot about that, and I like a lot about the concept, is that I know seems to be a debate sometimes in the comic book industry on whether or not politics belong in comic books. And my argument is art is political. No matter what you do, art is always going to be political. It must be, or you have nothing. I mean, I can't imagine you doing art without having something to say. As soon as you say something, it's political. And I think that's a fantastic thing to have a comic book and use your art to say something of value.
Exactly. Yeah. When I taught, I made it very simple. I'm also a Kids in the Hall fan.
Mm.
If you ever seen it, it's a Toronto-based group of. It was done in the '80s. But anyway, there were these 5 guys that did the writing and did the acting. It wasn't like SNL. And Lorne Michaels, by the way, produced both of them. But it wasn't SNL. It was constant rehashing of talent. It was the same 5 guys, and they did this one particular. And I know I'm rambling, but he did this one particular skit where these 2 dorks, these 2 losers in life, wanted to get their haircuts, and they went to their sister's house, and they're going on and on and on, and she's not saying a word. She's perfect silence, and they're going on and on, and one of the questions they posed was, "What is art? Is art something you just put on a wall?" And it made me think. It says, I'm an artist. I should probably have an idea what art is. And I thought about it, and I listened and thinking of movies and thinking of my favorite songs and my favorite books and my favorite genre and everything. And I came to the conclusion that it's about the human condition. And then it made sense to me that it would be the human condition, because that's who your audience is. So if you're not touching their emotional buttons, angry, sad, anxious, whatever it may be, whatever it is you could tap into and make it relatable for somebody in the audience, that's your job. That's your job. And politics, polis, the Greek word meaning the people, for populists, that's where it is. If you people want to say, "Oh, don't politicize it," everything in life is politics, man. From the amount of money you have to pay for going through that toll bridge to where you think your taxes are going, or what the business is doing over there with the lobbyists and how they're taking this away and that away. It's daily life. Life is politics. It's just the way it is. If you have a structured society, you have to have politics. So politics has always been in comic books. Hate to break it to you. In the 1930s, it was about the Nazis, right? 1940s was about the Nazis. 1950s is about the atomic age. 1960s is about social civil unrest. Drugs in the 70s. Disco, they had the Dazzler. I mean, come on. Comic books have always been political. They've always touched on it. They just try not to have a partisan way of describing it. They try to go right down the middle with it. And I think that sucks. I don't think I owe it to anybody to be other than my opinion of things.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's popular. I'm really not that motivated by popularity. I've never really been. I'm motivated by good, interesting, intellectual discussion. That's what motivates me. And I'll find my audience if I'm not outselling everybody. Well, that's good. That means I'm not doing the same regurgitated bullshit that's been going on for 78 years or 80 years. Comics have been around. So it's I like the fact that we're having more artists in control and less publishers in control, because I just saw recently that woman has a new costume. She has a helmet with ears that you can't see her eyes. Okay. Oh, where have I seen that before? Oh, every other year. So that doesn't interest me anymore, but they know that's the udder that makes the milk. So and they'll tug on it over and over again, death and rebirth, new costumes, who can out hit who, and never stray away from the character the way we've established it, despite the fact that these are supposed to be people we're talking about, and that people have a tendency to evolve, change, and go with the times. So the publishers, God bless them. They are the linchpin of the industry.
Yeah.
You can't have an independent market without it.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think it's time we did more. I think
Yeah.
they disrespect the audiences and acumen.
I find that the only groups of people who have issues, the only two people who have issues with politics in the comic book are either ones who are in such a place of privilege that they don't have to worry about what's happening, or two, the people who don't like what's being said. That's the only two groups who seem to have an issue.
And oftentimes they're the same group.
Yeah.
There are people that don't like change. Well, then you can go by way of the pharaohs and the Egyptian, the ancient Egypt, because they stayed stagnant for 3,000 years and then they got wiped out. You have to evolve.
Yep.
Change is inevitable, and you have to be able to see it, and you have to be able to adjust to it, and it may be uncomfortable, but it's just there's no choice. It's the world. This ball he rolls around forever. Okay. That might be predictable, but that means there's also motion, and motion is constant. So
on the writer, as we mentioned, Order and Outrage is Jim Starlin, right? So when you're working with Jim Starlin, are you working in a Marvel plot way, or are you working from full script?
Nobody does Marvel anymore. That died in the 80s. No, it's and especially now, since there's so many scripts that are so many screenplays that are viable. Thanks to computer graphics, the fantasies become that much more palpable. So everybody who writes now thinks they're writing a screenplay, and that unfortunately leaves an artist having to say, "I'm here. You don't have to use me as an extension of your brilliance, because that sucks." Work. And you really need to listen to my point of view. So I try not to do too many changes. If I have something that's a wholesale change, I'll get in contact with people, with the writer, and ask, can we do this? Can we do that? Where are you going with this? Because this is my idea. Because it's important too, because one editor told me once that writers, the only two people in the assembly line that know everything going on in that storyline or that particular book are the pencilers and the colorists, because we're the ones that marinate. Inkers follow the pencilers; they don't have to think about it. Letterers are just putting down the dialogue; they don't have to think about it. And writers forget what they did 3-4 issues ago. So it's constantly they're constantly moving forward, forgetting, oh, wait a minute, that didn't make any sense because I established something else first. And now we're here, and now the pencil is, stabbing his eyes with his pencils. It's like that, and because we have to wrangle them back in and say, okay, this is where we were, where are we going, and that's when the questions come up, and that's when we start discussing things. But with Jim, being a former artist, he's smart. He knows to leave it alone. He knows to give just enough information, let the artist breathe. He's not very dictatorial. So or dictatorial. Anyway, so Jim is wonderful. It is a full script. It's panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. Description, dialogue. Balloon 1, 2, 3, and then we try to meander. So all the information's there, and most writing is superfluous anyway, because it's designed to give you an atmosphere, a lot to think about. And then from there, you pull the most important items and put them on paper. So that's basically how it goes. And we're in January. Next month, I'll be 34 years in the industry. So I kind of know what I'm doing. Yeah, a lot of times you just let it to me anyway, and they'll forget. They know it's in somebody who's capable and knows what they're doing.
So I think when I saw the cover, at least one of the covers to the series, the first issue. Now, when you're conceptualizing a cover for a first issue of something, especially a property that no one's heard of before, how do you kind of determine how to express the entire storyline to new readers in that one image so they pick up that comic book.
Yeah, that's always the challenge, in particular with the first issue, because the idea is to try to make it a movie poster, tell everything you need to know about it. So you have the antagonist, you have the protagonist. In this particular cover, you have them as a backdrop. You have leaves turning into DNA strands on the sides. That's a hint. You have buildings blowing up in the background. That's a hint. You have all these myriad of races and aliens in the foreground running away from it. So there you go. You've got tall buildings, skyscrapers in the lower classes. Right there. Upper crust, lower crust. Very simple. And then of course the whole thing about DNA and everything kind of becomes apparent as we go along. So it's just you try to again, it's about the human content, right? So I had fear in there. I had power by having this very large, nefarious looking man, and I had, of course, outrage. So you have stubborn dictatorial emotion, you had emotional, and then you had fear. So you got all these things swirling in there. So you try to tap onto the emotions, and so long as you're hitting them, people are going to say, "Oh, I recognize that. Oh, I recognize that. This looks interesting." And so it's every cover has been like that. I just handed in a couple weeks ago the fourth cover. So
very cool. So my understanding is, like I said, gene manipulation is a major part of the story, and it's all basically an allegory for the classes, as you mentioned. So when you're doing the internal pages, how are you reflecting that allegory of class within the story?
One panel at a time.
Okay.
Necessary, it's cooking. You can't throw salt into everything, right? You have to, and it's all about timing. So cooking is a nice metaphor for it. It's a little this, a little that, a little time, let that simmer, and then you try to get it all together in the end. So you don't attack every panel with having to have like a list of items that you have to do. Your list of items is your genre. Okay. That's what you put aside. Okay. You get there eventually. The idea is to make it a roller coaster ride and make it much more interesting as you go along. Because you said this is not for kids. Not everything is the money shot, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Not everything is they tried that in the 90s and they failed.
So when you're looking at the story, and when they're approaching it, is the story beginning with the rebellion already happening, or is it are we building up to it?
It's funny because Jim's writing and oh my god, I'm drawing a blank. I'm very sorry. I should know this. The co-writer as well. He is a co-writer. They're a team, and I implore you, audience, look up the co-writer. It kind of starts off with a lot of the way comic books are being written now anyway, where it's kind of like fast forward, flashback, fast forward, where we are now, where kind of like bounces around for the first by the end of the third issue, you have a full idea where we're going, and then comes the meat of it, because after all, this was designed to be a trilogy initially, and we have 240 pages to tell the story, so we have plenty of time to let the whole content breathe, and I think it's really cleverly done. I think it's very entertaining.
I do wonder if Lost was the one that triggered that kind of storytelling, the story flashback. I really wonder if Lost is the one that got that rolling.
Maybe for TV. I don't know, but maybe for TV. But that kind of thing, comics are doing that long before Lost. You know, when writers started becoming more along the lines, well, let's get someone who's a novelist in here. Let's get someone who's written for soap operas or TV or movies or whatever. People who love comics because it was part of their upbringing as a writer, and have like I did. I thought I'd be an illustrator. I thought I'd be Norman Rockwell. And then so I try to pull some of those sensibilities as something that has been considered immature, perhaps. And the art has elevated, the storytelling has elevated, and I think it's basically because we've been bringing in people that aren't just rubber stamp comic book people from the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
So the people who are with Outrage, the people who are going to have the rebellion, what are they primarily outraged about? Is it just the leader, or the whole idea of gene manipulation to begin? At the very core of that.
Well, you're trying to get me to spill the beans. I see what you're doing. I see how you are. To be honest with you, even I don't know where it's going. I have a lot of questions because I don't have the entire 12-issue run, so I can't tell you. Thankfully, because I'm a blabbermouth. Order is the overbearing overseer of everything, and so there you go. As protagonists go and antagonists go, it's all about just getting to the point of that climax. So how we get there, that's where the craft is.
I think that's another question. I'm not sure if it's spoiler or not. I was going to say the character of Outrage. I assumed in RAs always start off in a position of power within the rebellion. Does that affect the character at all? That now, is it a female character? Outrage is female.
Rags to riches, baby, and yeah, female.
So does that impact her as well, beginning to stir any issues of power that now she's in charge of a group of people?
I don't know. I told you I don't have issues.
No worries. So I have to ask the question. I got to dig at least a little bit and try to get something out of it.
You're doing a job, man. Believe me. Jim didn't give me the synopsis. Jim, you didn't give me the synopsis. I can't tell. I don't know.
You gotta get Jim on the show so I can harass him with these questions. So you can yell at me that I'm giving away spoilers. Yeah. So we talked earlier about giving credit to the colorist, and I think it's important to talk about the colorist here. Holly Brown. Am I pronouncing it right? Haley Brown.
Haley Brown. Yes.
So how does Haley's colors accentuate your pencils?
Haley was a former student of mine.
Oh wow.
Haley was actually one of the students actually did have a job and managed to work weekends. And she is invaluable in terms of reliability because even as a student, I knew that she was an amazing manager of time. And she's been very, very good at keeping this because she wants to flat it herself. Okay. A lot of colorists hire other people to flat it, and then they come in and they just, do sections at a time and put it all together. And flatting takes a long time, but she wants to do it herself because she already has an idea of the color. So she already drops the colors as she flats and then builds it up from there. And Haley, she has a penchant for, she's an avid gamer. So she has a penchant for anime gaming kind of a thing. And if you follow her on Instagram, Hail Ren Arts, hailrenarts.com, Blockmind on Tumblr, you can see that she has a very cell animation template. That palette is it's a bit more of the manga or anime kind of brightness, which is really cool because I demure things with my gray tones and she punches them up. So there's like this balance going between us. She's smart. I ask her questions. Well, why did you go in this direction and that direction? She'll just look at me like, Well, because then when she's done explaining to it, I says, well, then she has a right to feel this way because that would, she is very thoughtful, very intellectually thoughtful. I mean, she was a former scientist, by the way. She's a former field biologist.
Very cool.
Very smart. So I trust her to give me something that makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense to me. When she does give me the explanation, it makes absolute sense. So I fully appreciate her intellect. I appreciate her durability. I appreciate her just talent and her vision. And we're really, I mean, with the first third of it, close to wrapping up, I really have a thorough appreciation for the way that we're developing, because in any partnership, and it doesn't matter if you're just working as a coworker or if you're married, there's going to be some friction, a time where two things kind of have to rub, and that friction creates or diminishes. And in this case, we're rising up together, and I really appreciate that. She's tremendous, terrific. In fact, we've done stuff together before. I did some covers for Dynamite where she did some coloring on it. We did a 6-pager for Source Point Press that's coming out this summer, something called A Cover of Darkness anthology. We did 6 pages of a Hercules story. So now she's just super smart, super good, and I'm glad I'm getting her now, because now there's loyalty involved, and when she gets pulled for other projects, I'll be like, hey, wait a minute, what about me? Not matter anymore. So
you say it's a 4-issue miniseries that's going to be a trilogy of 4 issues. Are you guarantee that the next part 5, 6, 7, 8 are definitely going to be made? They're definitely happening. As
far as I know, until they tell me otherwise. I think they're going to do it in sections, like 4 issues at a time, then a little break, then the next 4 issues, then a little break, and then the final. I don't think it's going to be like month. I can't do month anymore. I'm too old for that shit. I'm 56. My God, my eyes, they dry out, and I have to take naps just to get my eyes refreshed, It's a sad thing. Age sucks.
I know. I just hit 43 and I'm feeling older already.
You've got lots coming.
Yeah, I trust me. I already know. I can already feel when I get up, my bones go crack. I was like, son of a bitch, I didn't feel it.
Oh, no. It's not the crack. No. It's the shift of muscle that all of a sudden seizes you like this, and then then for a while. Yeah.
The pleasure of the Charlie horse. So when can the listeners find the first issue of Order and Outrage?
March.
All right.
Pay attention. We're going to be, Jim and I were going to be promoting it. He doesn't have much of a social presence, but I do. So, people following me on Facebook, on Tumblr, on Instagram, I'll be letting people know.
All right, very cool, Mr. Morales. It's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir, and keep up being one of the best artists in the business. Thank you so much.
I'm trying. Okay, thank you.